Flags lower, fists clench, crowds cheer like it's a sport, but it isn't. This is the Wagah Border Ceremony, a daily ritual where India and Pakistan stage a perfectly choreographed standoff. Just 150 kilometers away lies the Line of Control. Not a line, not even control, it's a wound. Along its jagged edge, entire villages live under the shadow of sudden war, where peace lasts no longer than a prayer. And still they stay. Why? Because leaving doesn't guarantee survival, but staying just might. Number 1. The origin of the conflict. Some borders are drawn with ink. This one was drawn with blood, and it's still bleeding. To understand why the Line of Control is one of the most volatile places on Earth, we have to go back, not just decades, but to the very birth of two nations. In August of the year 1947, the British Empire loosened its grip on the Indian subcontinent. What followed was one of the most traumatic partitions in human history. Over 14 million people were uprooted overnight. Nearly 2 million lost their lives in communal violence, and a fragile peace was carved out of chaos. But Jammu and Kashmir was different. This princely state, rich in culture and caught between Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan, refused to choose a side. When tribal militias backed by Pakistan invaded in October that same year, the Maharaja of Kashmir acceded to India in exchange for military protection. That single decision ignited the First Indo-Pak War, a conflict that would set the tone for decades to come. Fast forward to the year 1965, and then again in 1971. Two more wars flared up with Kashmir, always at the heart of the firestorm. But none were as surgically brutal, nor as technologically telling as the Kargil conflict of 1999. The Kargil War began in the dead of winter, when Pakistani soldiers disguised as militants infiltrated Indian positions high in the mountains. What followed was 10 weeks of high-altitude warfare. Over 500 Indian soldiers and more than 300 Pakistani troops were killed in terrain where the temperature dropped below -15 degrees Celsius and oxygen was as rare as rest. Kargil was more than a military operation. It was a reminder that this was not just a border dispute. It was a trauma that neither side had ever fully healed from. This is where the Line of Control comes into focus. Not an internationally recognized border. The LOC is a ceasefire line, a ghost of a boundary created under the Simla Agreement in the year 1972. It snakes across the Pir Panjal Range, cutting through valleys and villages, splitting lives in two. It's roughly 740 kilometers long, but feels longer when you're living every meter of it in fear. And that fear isn't just about bullets. Geographically, this region is unforgiving. Steep ridges, avalanche-prone slopes, narrow roads barely hanging onto cliffs. Politically, it's a pressure cooker. With both nations nuclear-armed since the late 1990s, even a skirmish can threaten regional, even global stability. Religiously, it's layered. While the majority of Kashmiris are Muslim, there are also significant Hindu and Buddhist communities, each with their own history, identity, and grievances. This tangled web of loyalties, landscapes, and long-held wounds makes Kashmir not just a flashpoint, but a wound that gets poked by politics, provoked by ideology, and ignored by peace. And today, as of 2025, over 70,000 people, mostly civilians, have lost their lives in the Kashmir conflict since the late 1980s, according to human rights groups. That's not counting the thousands more wounded, displaced, or psychologically scarred. So when you look at the Line of Control from a satellite image, it's just a line. But on the ground, it's a wall made of memory, mistrust, and missed opportunities, and perhaps the most painful part of it all. No one alive today chose this border, but everyone living along it is still paying the price. Number 2, living under fire. You can hear it before you see it, the low, distant thud that shakes the earth ever so slightly. For most of us, that sound would mean danger. But for the people living near the line of control, it means it's just another Tuesday. In the villages of Poonch and Rajouri on the Indian side and Neelam Valley across the border in Pakistan, life unfolds under the constant threat of fire, and not the kind that warms. This isn't a war zone in the conventional sense. There are no sirens, no international press, no evacuation plans, just families trying to live. Take Gulzar Ahmad, a shopkeeper in Neelam. His home has a bunker, not for valuables, but for survival. We keep our documents and radios down there, he says. Sometimes we even share it with neighbors during the nights of heavy shelling. The community here has adapted in ways that seem unimaginable elsewhere, developing their own signals, their own routines, their own rules, for when the ground shakes. Survival in this region has evolved into an art form. Families bury their savings in steel boxes beneath kitchen floors because banks don't exist, this close to a ceasefire line. Every household has an emergency bag, documents medicine, a small flashlight, and a prayer book. Women can pack up a home in under 3 minutes. Residents instinctively avoid windows. Some homes have no windows at all. According to the South Asia Terrorism Portal, between the years 2020 and 2024, there were over 1,500 ceasefire violations along the Low Sea, each one a reminder that this line is written in anything but ink. Civilians made up a disturbing percentage of the casualties. In the year 2023 alone, at least 120 civilians, many of them elderly or working outdoors, were injured or killed. But it's not just the numbers that cut deep, it's the stories behind them. In a village near Poonch, a group of musicians had gathered one afternoon to rehearse for a wedding. A stray mortar shell landed nearby, scattering the instruments, injuring 2 performers. We had just started tuning the harmonium, one man recalled later. The sound was drowned out by something no music can soften, and that's another silent wound trauma. Mental health professionals working in the region have recorded a growing number of PTSD cases, especially among those who've endured repeated displacement or witnessed violence. Night terrors, sudden aggression, and anxiety attacks are common, but therapy is a luxury they can't afford. Instead, they rely on prayer community and resilience, the kind that doesn't show up in any official report. Before each military escalation, life had some semblance of normalcy. Villagers played cricket in fields that are now riddled with craters. Weddings filled the air with music instead of dread. Farmers tilled land without fear that a step too far left could mean stepping on something deadly. But after each clash, whether it's a sniper exchange, drone intrusion, or heavy artillery shelling the rhythm of life, changes again. Shops close earlier. Schools shut down for weeks. Fields lie fallow, not from lack of water, but from fear. Even celebrations like weddings or religious festivals are quiet, subdued. Hope becomes cautious. Joy comes with terms and conditions. And yet people stay. Why? Because for them, this is not just a battleground, it's home. It's where their ancestors were buried, where traditions are kept alive, where stories are passed from one generation to the next. It's where laughter echoes, even if only between bursts of gunfire. So the next time someone says, "Peace has returned because no shots were fired today," remember, this peace here is never guaranteed, it's borrowed, rented. Sometimes it doesn't even last the night. And for the people living beneath this uneasy sky, every morning they wake up is not a given, it's a triumph. Number 3, life on the front line. They call it the line of control, but for soldiers stationed along it, it's a line that never lets them rest. Every day at the LOC begins with tension and ends with uncertainty. Indian and Pakistani soldiers alike operate under a state of near constant readiness. Patrols rotate every few hours. Lookouts scan the foggy ridges through thermal scopes. At night, visibility drops to 0, but the threat level spikes. Any movement across the line, even a shadow, could be a drone or worse. These outposts aren't located in calm plains or stable terrain. Many are nestled in the high-altitude belts of the Pir Panjal and Zabarwan ranges, where winter temperatures fall below -20 degrees Celsius. At those heights, oxygen thins, frostbite creeps in. Fast and communication lines are often disrupted by storms. Yet the soldiers remain because leaving isn't an option. The psychological weight is just as heavy as the physical one. Living under sniper threat means never standing in the same spot twice. Simple acts, walking to the mess hall, boiling water, stepping outside to stretch, can become matters of life or death. Mines laid decades ago remain hidden beneath snow and soil, making every footstep a calculated risk. According to India's Ministry of Defense, at least 270 soldiers were injured or killed along the LOC between the years 2020 and 2024. Pakistan's armed forces report similar figures, citing not just direct exchanges, but weather-related deaths and accidental blasts from buried ordnance. The numbers don't always make headlines, but for the families of these men, the silence is louder than gunfire. And yet, even in a place designed for conflict, flickers of humanity still emerge. In several documented incidents, both armies have cooperated to return the bodies of soldiers who died during Crossfire or Avalanche's acts, governed by unspoken military codes of honor. In rare cases, one side has even sent warnings to avoid civilian casualties during planned strikes, a quiet gesture of decency amid decades of distrust. These are not fairy tales. They're footnotes in official reports, often overlooked but deeply telling. They show that even here, where the official line is no mercy, the unofficial one sometimes says, "We are still human." By 2025, both nations continue to strengthen their presence. India has deployed over 70,000 soldiers in Jammu and Kashmir, while Pakistan maintains a substantial force across the Lok. More drones, more sensors, more surveillance, and still the burden of holding the line rests on individual shoulders. Because at the end of the day, it's not satellites or systems that make the border real. It's the soldier cold, tired staring into darkness, who makes that line matter. And as long as that soldier stands, watch eyes scanning a horizon that never fully sleeps, the LOC remains more than just a boundary. It's a front line where peace itself holds its breath. Number 4. Drones and digital war. War used to be loud. Shells, crashing boots, stomping flags, waving. Now sometimes it's just a low hum in the sky right before the blast. Along the line of control, the sound of artillery is slowly being replaced by something quieter and far more unpredictable. Drones. In the last 5 years, the use of unmanned aerial vehicles or drones has skyrocketed along the India-Pakistan border. Once used mainly for surveillance, these flying machines now carry much more than cameras. Some deliver messages, others drop weapons, and a few carry explosives, silently crossing the LOC under the cover of darkness. According to India's Border Security Force, over 170 drone incursions were reported between the years 2021 and 2024. That's nearly one drone every week, and not all of them were harmless. In one particularly deadly incident in early 2023, a drone loaded with small arms and explosives crashed near a civilian house in Kathua district. 2 people were injured. The drone carried no flags, no warning, just payload. What makes this more dangerous than traditional shelling is precision and plausible deniability. Drones can fly low-dodge radar and be controlled remotely from miles away. And when something goes wrong, when a civilian dies, when a school gets hit, it's easy to blame a malfunction or worse, claim we don't know where it came from. But it's not just drones in the sky. The battlefield has gone digital. Cyber attacks, misinformation campaigns, and viral fake news have become weapons of choice. In 2024, an AI-generated video falsely claiming that Indian troops had attacked a Pakistani village spread across social media in just 12 hours, igniting protests and online fury. No such attack had occurred. In that same year, both countries were targeted by cyber attacks on government websites and news outlets. While no one officially took responsibility, the fallout was immediate public panic, false alerts, and a growing distrust of information from any source. This is the new reality: warfare without soldiers, battles fought with code bots and pixels. And for the people caught in the middle, it's a nightmare without a siren. Because with traditional warfare, at least you could hear the shells coming. You knew when to run. With drones and disinformation, the damage is done before you even know you're under attack. And what's worse, it creates two types of casualties. First, the physical kind, the lives lost to drone strikes, booby-trapped payloads, or attacks sparked by false reports. Second, and far more insidious, the collapse of public trust. People don't just lose homes, they lose faith. In media, in their governments, in each other. Every tweet, every headline, every video becomes suspect. Reality fractures. By 2025, both India and Pakistan have increased investment in drone technology and electronic warfare. India has launched over 12 new drone surveillance units across Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan. Two has tested its own fleet of weaponized drones, raising alarms in defense circles worldwide. And while these technologies were built in the name of national security, the people living near the LOC often feel more insecure than ever. Because when a war becomes invisible, when enemies are data packets and the first casualty is truth, how do you know what's real? And more importantly, how do you protect yourself from a war you can't even see coming? Number 5. Civilians in the crossfire. They are not soldiers. They don't carry rifles or wear uniforms, but they are on the front lines every single day. Civilians living near the line of control pay a price that rarely makes headlines. While the world counts missiles and drones, these people count lost limbs, broken homes, and days spent waiting for silence that never truly comes. According to a joint report by the South Asian Human Rights Observatory and regional monitoring groups, more than 1,200 civilians were either killed or injured in cross-border incidents between the years 2020 and 2024. A significant portion were elderly villagers, laborers, and women who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, often inside their own homes. But the impact of this conflict can't be measured by numbers alone. In areas like Urai and Tangdar, entire community centers lie abandoned local businesses, once bustling with tea stalls and vegetable carts, now open for only a few hours a day, if at all. In Neelam Valley, several neighborhood libraries and vocational training centers have shuttered not due to lack of interest, but because the risk of gathering in one place has become too great. The quiet hum of daily life has been replaced by the anxious rustle of what if. Medical care is another daily struggle. In many isolated hamlets, health posts are chronically understaffed or lack even the most basic equipment. The nearest functioning clinic might be over 30 kilometers away, across terrain, marked by hairpin turns, broken bridges, and weather that often closes roads for weeks at a time. During flare-ups, travel becomes not just difficult, but dangerous. One paramedic described the reality in simple, stark words. No burn kits, no trauma stretchers, just gauze antiseptic and hope. Gunpowder burns open wounds from falling debris and shock-related collapses. These aren't rare cases. They're routine. And beyond the wounds you can see lie the ones you can't. Mental health, long overlooked, is now an open wound in itself. Merchants who once ran thriving shops now battle chronic anxiety. Farmers who braved the fields for decades now hesitate at sunrise. The weight of unpredictability has reshaped entire communities. Studies conducted in early 2024 indicate that over half of civilians living within close range of the LOC experience symptoms, consistent with prolonged stress, sleeplessness, tension headaches, emotional withdrawal. Yet in spite of this, or maybe because of it, a quiet resistance continues to grow. Even with limited resources, local networks have emerged to protect and uplift. In Baramulla, a group of women have built makeshift underground shelters for their neighborhoods using salvaged materials and community donations. In Muzaffarabad, youth-led initiatives have organized mobile clinics and mental health awareness campaigns, often reaching remote areas no formal service will go. Training workshops now equip villagers with basic skills in first aid, radio communication, and community organizing. These are not sweeping reforms. They are not funded by global aid or broadcast in the media, but they are real, Because in a war that offers no choices, survival itself becomes an act of defiance. Restoring a roof, cooking a shared meal, planting new seeds. Despite old fears, these become declarations of hope, shouted in the language of action, not words. And in those actions lies the real story. Behind every number is a neighbor. Behind every scarred wall is a memory. And behind every so-called border incident is a life altered but not erased. Number 6, small steps toward peace. In a place where even silence can sound like fear, any whisper of peace feels like a miracle. In February of the year 2021, both India and Pakistan agreed to a surprise joint statement, a reaffirmation of the ceasefire along the line of control. For the first time in years, gunfire didn't echo across the valleys every night. For nearly 12 months, the ceasefire held, no major violations, no civilian deaths. Farmers returned to their fields. Children walked to school without glancing over their shoulders. It was fragile, yes, but it was peace. And while politicians made the headlines, it was regular people who built the bridges. Take the cross-border reunions moments that felt like scenes from another world. Families separated since partition, more than 70 years ago, were allowed to meet in designated zones, under strict security. Elderly brothers embraced through fences. Grandmothers met grandchildren they had only seen in faded photographs. These weren't policy breakthroughs. They were proof that even the deepest wounds can still ache with love. Journalists, too, tried something rare, collaboration instead of competition. In 2022, independent filmmakers from both sides quietly co-produced a short documentary on border schools showing how children in both countries drew the same pictures when asked to sketch home. The film was never broadcast on national television, but it went viral online. In less than 1 week, it gathered over 500,000 views. Sometimes truth travels best through stories, not slogans. Artists and educators also stepped into the conversation. Musicians composed ballads calling for unity. Teachers redesigned lessons to include voices from both nations' histories, not just one side of the tale. In some colleges near the border, debate clubs replaced military drills. The idea wasn't to erase the past, but to humanize it. Still, peace, like anything precious, is delicate. Internal politics have a way of undoing progress. On both sides, hardline rhetoric rises sharply before national elections. Enemies at the gate makes for stronger headlines than neighbors seeking dialogue. Ceasefire agreements, though signed with pen and paper, are often shredded by pride and propaganda. And then there's the darker undercurrent, cross-border terrorism. In late 2023, an attack in the Pulwama district once again threatened to unravel trust. Within hours, fingers pointed, accusations flew, and just like that, the mood shifted. Talks were postponed. Hope was put on hold. International observers from the United Nations and neutral states have repeatedly urged for long-term dialogue mechanisms, but progress remains sluggish. Every time momentum builds, something breaks either through violence or vote-chasing nationalism. It's as if the two countries are trapped in a loop: talk, pause, accuse, repeat. Yet, and this is important, the fires of peace haven't gone out. They flicker. Grassroots organizations still organize peace workshops even if attendance is small. Young activists in Delhi and Lahore hold online conferences, sometimes under pseudonyms, to protect their identities. Some people write poetry, others plant trees, not because it ends war, but because it defies it. By the year 2025, over 90% of the LOC remains militarized. But here's what matters. Every time a farmer returns to his land without fear, every time two children laugh across a fence, every time an artist chooses paint over propaganda, a little more of that darkness gets pushed back. Peace may not march in with flags. Sometimes it tiptoes in unnoticed, unfinished, but undeniably alive. And in a place where darkness has lasted so long, even a small fire can light the way. The India-Pakistan border isn't just a line on a map. It's a fragile thread holding together moments of peace in a landscape shaped by decades of conflict. For the people who live here, life is a balancing act between resilience and fear, courage and loss. They are the silent guardians of a fragile ceasefire, not by choice, but by circumstance. Every reopened classroom, every hand that tills the soil, every meal shared under an uneasy sky, they all speak to one truth, that even in the lingering shadow of conflict, the will to live with dignity endures. But the question still lingers, can lasting peace ever grow where mistrust runs so deep? Or will history and pride keep rewriting the future? Because in the end, no one truly wins a war that never ends. Only the civilians, always, lose. If this story moved you or opened your eyes to a side of the world we rarely see, consider liking the video, subscribing to NVL Travel Documentary, or leaving a comment below. Your voice matters, and together we keep these stories alive. Until next time, keep exploring and keep seeing. Every morning as the sun sinks behind the red sandstone gates of Wagah, two sets of boots stomp the earth with synchronized fury. Flags lower, fists clench, crowds cheer like it's a sport, but it isn't. This is the Wagah Border Ceremony, a daily ritual where India and Pakistan stage a perfectly choreographed standoff. Just 150 kilometers away lies the Line of Control. Not a line, not even control, it's a wound. Along its jagged edge, entire villages live under the shadow of sudden war, where peace lasts no longer than a prayer. And still they stay. Why? Because leaving doesn't guarantee survival, but staying just might. Number 1. The origin of the conflict. Some borders are drawn with ink. This one was drawn with blood, and it's still bleeding. To understand why the Line of Control is one of the most volatile places on Earth, we have to go back, not just decades, but to the very birth of two nations. In August of the year 1947, the British Empire loosened its grip on the Indian subcontinent. What followed was one of the most traumatic partitions in human history. Over 14 million people were uprooted overnight. Nearly 2 million lost their lives in communal violence, and a fragile peace was carved out of chaos. But Jammu and Kashmir was different. This princely state, rich in culture and caught between Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan, refused to choose a side. When tribal militias backed by Pakistan invaded in October that same year, the Maharaja of Kashmir acceded to India in exchange for military protection. That single decision ignited the First Indo-Pak War, a conflict that would set the tone for decades to come. Fast forward to the year 1965, and then again in 1971. Two more wars flared up with Kashmir, always at the heart of the firestorm. But none were as surgically brutal, nor as technologically telling as the Kargil conflict of 1999. The Kargil War began in the dead of winter, when Pakistani soldiers disguised as militants infiltrated Indian positions high in the mountains. What followed was 10 weeks of high-altitude warfare. Over 500 Indian soldiers and more than 300 Pakistani troops were killed in terrain where the temperature dropped below -15 degrees Celsius and oxygen was as rare as rest. Kargil was more than a military operation. It was a reminder that this was not just a border dispute. It was a trauma that neither side had ever fully healed from. This is where the Line of Control comes into focus. Not an internationally recognized border. The LOC is a ceasefire line, a ghost of a boundary created under the Simla Agreement in the year 1972. It snakes across the Pir Panjal Range, cutting through valleys and villages, splitting lives in two. It's roughly 740 kilometers long, but feels longer when you're living every meter of it in fear. And that fear isn't just about bullets. Geographically, this region is unforgiving. steep ridges, avalanche-prone slopes, narrow roads barely hanging onto cliffs. Politically, it's a pressure cooker. With both nations nuclear-armed since the late 1990s, even a skirmish can threaten regional, even global stability. Religiously, it's layered. While the majority of Kashmiris are Muslim, there are also significant Hindu and Buddhist communities, each with their own history, identity, and grievances. This tangled web of loyalties, landscapes, and long-held wounds makes Kashmir not just a flashpoint, but a wound that gets poked by politics, provoked by ideology, and ignored by peace. And today, as of 2025, over 70,000 people, mostly civilians, have lost their lives in the Kashmir conflict since the late 1980s, according to human rights groups. That's not counting the thousands more wounded, displaced, or psychologically scarred